She wore old scrubs, carried wildflowers, and came only to watch her son graduate till 2 guards tried to shame her, and 10 Navy SEALs stood up to show the world who she really was. Claire Evans was not the kind of woman who expected much from life. She had lived through loss, pain, long nights, and countless emergencies. But even with all the heartbreak and pressure, she'd never let life harden her. She was a nurse, a mother, a quiet hero. Her story wasn't on the news, and most people who passed her on the street never looked twice. But those who knew her, really knew her, saw someone made of strength, sacrifice, and love. Her day always started before the sun came up. She'd pack a small breakfast, usually something cheap and simple, like a boiled egg and toast. She wore clean but old scrubs. The fabric had faded from so many washes. Her shoes had a small tear on one side, but she still wore them because buying new ones meant less money for food or bills. Her hospital shifts were long, sometimes 12 hours. Straight without rest, she didn't complain. She knew how many people needed her. She would go from one patient to another, stitching wounds, comforting scared children, helping the elderly sit up in bed, holding the hands of the dying when their families weren't there. She saw pain every day, but she never showed her own. Claire's husband, Michael, had been a U.S. Marine, strong, disciplined, and full of laughter. He was the love of her life. When he died in Afghanistan while saving his team from an ambush, Claire didn't break. She held on, mostly for her son Aiden, who was only 7 at the time. She knew Michael wouldn't want her to crumble, so she stayed strong. She worked more hours, sold her wedding ring to pay for Aiden's school supplies, and cut every corner to give him the best life she could. Aiden was a bright, kind-hearted boy, didn't speak much, but when he did, it was always thoughtful. He saw how hard his mother worked, and even at a young age, he made a silent promise to never waste her efforts. He studied hard, stayed away from trouble, and helped his mom whenever he could. Their home wasn't fancy, just a small apartment with a leaky roof and a second-hand couch, but it was filled with love. As Aiden grew older, Claire faced more challenges: medical bills, rising rent, and a car that broke down every other week. But her biggest fear wasn't money. It was missing Aiden's important moments. She had missed his science fair once because of an emergency at the hospital. The look on his face when she arrived late haunted her for weeks. Since then, she promised herself that she would be present no matter what. That's why a dance. High school graduation meant everything to her. It wasn't just a ceremony. It was a symbol of everything they had survived together. Late-night study sessions, missed meals, tears, and hugs. She had circled the date on the calendar, months in advance. She requested the day off, traded shifts, and even refused extra pay just to make sure she could be there. The night before the graduation, Claire ironed her cleanest pair of scrubs. She didn't own any fancy clothes, all the dresses she once had worse sold years ago. But her scrubs were neat, and they represented who she was, a nurse who saved lives. She brushed her hair carefully, found an old pair of earrings from her wedding day, and stood in front of the mirror. Tired, yes, but she also looked proud. Her son was graduating. The next morning, she woke up extra early. She bought a small bouquet of wildflowers from a street vendor. They weren't roses or lilies, but they were bright and beautiful, just like the hope she carried in her heart. She arrived at the school before the crowd, smiling politely at the teachers and other parents as families filled the auditorium. Claire walked toward the front section, hoping to get a good seat. She had received an email saying Aiden would be honored as one of the top students. She wanted to be close enough to take a picture of him when his name was called. As she stepped toward the roped-off VIP section, 2 men in black suits stepped in front of her. "Excuse me, ma'am," one of them said, holding up his hand. "This section is for invited families only." Claire paused. "I'm Aiden Evans' mother," she said kindly, lifting her flower bouquet. "He's one of the honor students. I think this is where I'm supposed to sit." The other guard looked her up and down, clearly noticing her scrubs and worn shoes. "I'm sorry, but we have a dress code for this section. It's no uniforms, no scrubs. It's a formal event." Claire felt a sting of embarrassment, but stayed calm. "I understand, but I'm not here in a professional role. I'm just a mother here to watch her son graduate. One guard sighed, trying to remain polite. I get that, ma'am. But we were given clear instructions. If your name isn't on this list and you're not dressed appropriately, we can't let you in this section. Claire looked around. Parents in suits and dresses were entering without being stopped. Some of them barely even glanced at the guards. She looked back at them, confused and quietly hurt. Please, she whispered. I just want to be close. Enough to see his face. Sorry, the taller guard said firmly. You'll need to find a seat in the back. People were beginning to stare. Claire didn't want to make a scene. She gave a small nod and stepped back, heart sinking. She found a seat at the back of the auditorium, far from the stage. From there, the flowers in her hands looked smaller. She couldn't even see where Aiden was sitting. Her eyes welled up, but she refused to cry. She sat quietly, holding the bouquet in her lap, feeling invisible. Around her, parents took photos and shared stories. No one spoke to her. A few looked at her with awkward sympathy, but no one stood up to say, "That's not right." Claire didn't know was that her son, sitting on the stage with his classmates, had seen everything. He had turned around just in time to see the two guards blocking his mother. He saw her face, the disappointment she tried to hide, and something in him shifted. All his years of quiet respect turned into a surge of emotion. He leaned over and whispered something to the teacher sitting nearby. She looked confused, but listened carefully. Then Aiden quietly got up and disappeared behind the curtain. Claire sat in the back, unaware of what was happening. Her thoughts were scattered, a mix of shame, sadness, and deep pride. She told herself not to let this moment ruin the day. She would cheer when his name was called, even if he couldn't hear her. She would clap loudly, even if he couldn't see her. But then, something changed in the air. The noise in the auditorium softened. Whispers grew. Heads turned toward the entrance. Claire looked up in confusion. A group of 10 men in uniform walked into the room. Their footsteps were in sync, powerful and calm. They weren't part of the staff or school. They were U.S. Navy SEALs. They walked straight down the center aisle, past the rows of parents, past the shocked guards, stopped right in front of Claire. The leader, tall, with sharp eyes and a chest full of medals, looked at her and gave a full military. "Salute, ma'am," he said with deep respect. "You don't know us, but we know who you are." The room fell completely silent. Everyone stared. Claire blinked, unsure what was happening. The man continued, "Years ago, you saved my mother's life in a highway crash. You weren't even on duty. You pulled her from a burning car and stayed with her until help arrived. We never forgot." Claire's mouth opened, but no words came. "We heard what happened just now," the SEAL said, "and we're here to make sure you're seen and honored." Without waiting for permission, they gently guided her to the front row. The guards stepped aside, their faces pale. Claire's heart pounded as the entire room stood up, clapping, cheering, some with tears in their eyes. For the first time that morning, she smiled, not a small one, but a real, full smile. She sat down, holding her flowers tightly, feeling like she belonged, and she didn't know it yet. But this was only the beginning of what would become a moment the world would never forget. Claire sat in the front row now, but her hands were still shaking. The wildflowers in her lap felt more precious now, like a symbol of something sacred. People around her were whispering, some even wiping their eyes. She could hear quiet gasps. The kind people make when they see something they weren't expecting. She didn't know where to look, what to feel. Her heart was still catching up with her mind. 10 Navy SEALs had just walked into her son's graduation and escorted her to the front like she was royalty. Just a few minutes ago, she had been pushed to the back. Now, she was sitting among the most respected guests. But Claire wasn't thinking about the attention. She wasn't thinking about the applause. All she could think about was Aiden. Did he see this? Did he know what had just happened? Did he feel proud? On the stage behind the curtain, Aiden stood in a narrow hallway with his hands clenched into fists. He was trying to breathe slowly, trying to calm the storm inside him. The moment he saw the guard stop his mother, something in him broke. He didn't care about rules or ceremonies anymore. This was his graduation. But more than that, it was her moment. She had earned it more than anyone else in that room. The teacher he'd spoken to backstage was kind but confused.
Out.
You mean SEALs? She'd asked. She saved one of their families. But they know her. I think they'd come if I asked, Aiden replied. She stared at him. You're serious? He nodded. The teacher didn't stop him. It was the look in his eyes, calm but burning with something strong. Aiden took out his phone, stepped into a quiet corner, and made a call. It was a number he had saved for years. A man named Noah Jensen, a Navy SEAL whose family Claire had once helped. When Noah answered, Aiden spoke quickly, voice low but clear. I know this is sudden, but my mom, she's at my graduation. They pushed her to the back because she's wearing scrubs. Said she didn't belong in the front row. She saved your mom's life, remember? I just need someone to remind them who she is. There was silence on the other end. Then Noah said, Where is this happening? Lincoln High School. Auditorium right now. Aiden hung up and walked back out onto the stage. He didn't know if anything would happen. He wasn't even sure if Noah was in town. But a part of him believed, maybe hoped, that someone would understand. How wrong this was. When the 10 SEALs entered the auditorium, they didn't make a sound. But their presence was louder than any announcement. They moved with purpose, respect, and calm authority. Claire was too shocked to stop them. People stood up instinctively. They thought maybe it was a military tribute. But no. This was for one woman, a nurse in scrubs, who had saved lives and expected nothing in return. The ceremony continued now, but the energy in the room had changed. People were paying more attention. The principal was clearly nervous. Stumbling a bit over his words, he made a point to thank all parents and especially those who serve others every day. And everyone knew who he meant. Claire sat quietly, watching the students walk one by one to receive their diplomas. Some looked at her with soft smiles. Few nodded respectfully as they passed by. It was as if everyone had realized something at the same time, that greatness doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears old scrubs and carries wildflowers. Then, it was Aiden's turn. His name echoed across the auditorium. Aiden Michael Evans, honors graduate. Claire's heart skipped a beat. She stood up, but not to clap. She stood because she couldn't sit anymore. Her eyes were fixed on her son, the boy she had raised through tears, hunger, double shifts, and lonely nights. He was walking across the stage, taller than she remembered, and smiling like he'd never smiled before. He shook hands with the principal, took his diploma, but didn't return to his seat. Instead, he stepped up to the podium. The crowd went quiet. It wasn't common for students to speak at that moment, but no one stopped him. His voice wasn't loud, but it reached every corner of the auditorium. My name is Aiden Evans, he said. And before I say anything else, I want to thank my mother. He paused, looking at Claire. My mom raised me alone after my dad, a Marine, died when I was 7. She worked night and day as a trauma nurse to make sure I had food, books, and hope. She didn't just take care of me. She took care of strangers. She saved lives. Some of those people are sitting here right now. He gestured toward the SEALs. She's been through more than most people in this room. And today, she was told she couldn't sit up front because of what she was wearing. Because her clothes didn't match the dress code. What they didn't know was that those scrubs have more honor stitched into them than any suit ever will. People began nodding, some clapped, others looked ashamed. I stand here today because of her. Everything I've achieved is because of her sacrifices. So today I give this diploma to her. He held out the rolled certificate. One of the SEALs walked up to the stage and took it, carrying it gently to Claire and placing it in her lap. Claire didn't know whether to cry or smile, so she did both. The crowd erupted in applause. Not polite claps, but deep, emotional, heartfelt applause. People stood again. This time it wasn't for the school or the program. It was for the woman in scrubs who had done the impossible. The guards who had turned Claire away earlier were nowhere to be seen. Whether they had been told to leave or had quietly slipped out, no one noticed. They had faded into the background, just as they had tried to do to her. After the ceremony, people came up to Claire one by one. Parents, students, teachers. Some just wanted to say thank you. Others apologized. One mother said, "You reminded me what matters today. Thank you for being you." The Seals stayed close, not to protect her, but to honor her. One of them leaned down and whispered, "Your son is a man of courage, just like his mom." Claire smiled. "He's better than I ever hoped." Outside in the school courtyard, families took photos. Claire and Aiden stood together, wildflowers in one hand, diploma in the other. They didn't need a backdrop or a filter. They were already glowing. Reporters showed up after hearing what had happened. Some tried to interview Claire. She gave only one short statement. "Never judge a mother's worth by the clothes she wears. Judge her by the child she raises." The story began spreading. Videos posted by parents went viral. People shared messages about dignity, sacrifice, and respect. Hospitals shared her story. Veterans shared her name. For a moment, the whole country paused to remember someone who had never asked for anything, but had given everything. Later that night, Claire and Aiden sat in their small apartment. The wildflowers were now in a glass jar. The diploma was propped against the wall. They ordered cheap takeout and ate on the floor, laughing and talking. They didn't need a celebration. They already had what mattered: each other. Claire looked at Aiden and said, "I'm proud of you." He smiled. "I'm proud of you too, Mom." Outside, the world kept turning. But in that little room, it was still. Just a mother and her son, two warriors, quiet and unbreakable, finally seen by the world for who they really were. The day after the graduation, Claire woke up earlier than usual. The apartment was quiet, filled with soft morning light that came through the thin curtains. Aiden was still asleep in the other room, probably exhausted from the emotional day they'd had. Claire sat at the edge of her bed for a few moments, staring at the bouquet of wildflowers now sitting in a glass jar on the table. They were starting to wilt, but to her, they were more beautiful than ever. Her phone had buzzed all night, dozens of messages, missed calls, emails, many from people she didn't know. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. Reporters had shown up at the school yesterday, and someone had posted a video of the Navy SEALs walking her to the front of the auditorium. Within hours, the clip had spread everywhere online. People were calling her a hero, a symbol of sacrifice, a true American mother. Claire didn't feel like any of those things. She had only done what any mother would do: fight silently for her child's future. But now, people wanted to talk to her. They wanted interviews, photos, quotes. Some news channels even offered money to have her come on their show. Claire wasn't interested. She didn't want to be famous. She just wanted to go back to work and continue her life quietly. Still, she couldn't ignore the messages from families she had helped in the past. Some had found her number and texted her warm, grateful words. A woman she hadn't spoken to in 7 years messaged her, "You held my father's hand when he was dying. I never forgot your kindness." Another message read, "My daughter remembers the sticker you gave her after her surgery. It made her laugh even though she was in pain. Thank you." Claire felt her eyes water. She had always wondered if the long hours and sleepless nights really made a difference. Now she was starting to believe they did. Meanwhile, Aiden woke up and found his mother sitting by the window. He sat next to her, still in his pajamas, and leaned his head on her shoulder. "You okay, Mom?" he asked gently. She smiled. "I think so. Just trying to understand everything." Aiden looked out the window with her. "Yesterday felt like a dream." Claire nodded. "The best kind." Aiden turned to her. "You know, those SEALs didn't just show up for me. They showed up for you. You think you've been invisible all these years? Mom, they really do see you, Mom. They really do." Claire took a deep breath. It just felt good to be seen as me, not just as a nurse or someone in scrubs, but as a mother, as a person. That afternoon, Claire decided to go back to work. She couldn't afford to miss too many shifts, and part of her needed normal life again. When she walked into the hospital, something was different. Nurses stopped and looked at her. Some clapped. A few smiled wide and said, "That was you on the video, wasn't it?" Doctors who usually walked past her without a word nodded respectfully. One of the head surgeons, known for being cold and strict, actually stopped her and said, "You make this hospital proud, Claire." She felt embarrassed by the attention, but also deeply moved. For years, she had felt overlooked, just one nurse, in a long hallway of busy faces, but now people saw her. That same day, a man arrived at the hospital asking for her. He wore a navy blue suit and introduced himself as Commander Brooks. He was with the Navy and said he was sent by the team who had come to the graduation. "I have something to give you," he said, handing her a black box. Claire opened it slowly and saw a folded American flag and a small gold medal inside. "This is the Navy Civilian Honor Award," he said. "It's not given lightly, but after what you did for one of our own and what your son did for you, the team agreed you deserve this." Claire didn't know what to say. She had seen medals before, but never imagined she'd receive one. Herself, the commander smiled gently. "Don't think of it as a reward. Think of it as a thank you from all of us." When he left, Claire stood in the hallway holding the box, surrounded by her fellow nurses. They didn't say anything at first, but one by one, they hugged her. Some had worked with her for years. Some were new. But all of them understood now who she really was. A few days later, something even more unexpected happened. Claire received an invitation hand-delivered to a dinner being held by the mayor of the city. It was an event meant to honor local heroes and community workers. She almost turned it down. She had no formal dress, no money to buy one, and no interest in fancy dinners. But Aiden insisted. "I'll figure it out," he said. "You're going." He borrowed a suit from a friend. Then he called a neighbor who used to sew dresses for events. Together, they fixed up an old blue dress Claire had worn 10 years ago. It still fit barely, but it looked beautiful. When the night of the dinner arrived, Claire was nervous. She wasn't used to wearing makeup or heels. But when she walked into the hall with Aiden by her side, the room stood and clapped. People she had never met were shaking her hand, thanking her, asking her to speak. She didn't make a long speech. She simply said, "I became a nurse because I wanted to help. I stayed a nurse because I wanted to serve. Nothing I've ever done means more than being a mother. That's the title I'm proudest of." The crowd clapped again, some with tears in their eyes. After that, offers started coming. A local university offered Aiden a full scholarship. Foundation reached out to Claire and offered to pay her rent for a year. A well-known hospital offered her a better position with higher pay and better hours. Claire didn't accept everything. She still believed in earning her way, but she was grateful. She accepted the rent support, allowing her and Aiden to finally move out of their tiny apartment into a small, clean home with 2 bedrooms and working heat. One morning, a man came to her door carrying a wrapped package. "A gift," he said, handing it over. Inside was a brand new set of nursing shoes and a letter from a fellow nurse who had once been inspired by Claire's kindness. The letter read, "When I almost quit nursing school, you told me one sentence: even tired hands can heal. I've never forgotten that. Thank you for giving me strength." Claire pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. For years, she had doubted herself, wondered if she was enough. Now strangers were reminding her that she was more than enough. One night, Aiden came home with something hidden behind his back. "Close your eyes, Mom," he said. When she opened them, she saw a photo frame. Inside it was a picture of her at the graduation, surrounded by the 10 seals, holding the bouquet of wildflowers. Underneath was a quote printed in simple font: "True strength doesn't shout. It simply stands back up." Claire laughed, then cried, then hugged her son tightly. That photo sat on their wall from that day forward. It reminded them of that powerful moment when truth rose above judgment, and kindness defeated shame. Though the world eventually moved on to the next viral story, Claire and Aiden held on to something more lasting. They kept living, working, dreaming, but now with a little more hope. And for Claire, every time she put on her scrubs, she did so with pride. Because now she knew something deeply true: even when life tries to silence you, dignity has a way of being heard. Claire stood in front of the mirror, gently adjusting the neckline of her scrubs. She still wore them every day, even though life had changed in many ways. Her new job at the city hospital paid more and came with respect she had never experienced. Before, people greeted her differently. Now nurses, doctors, even patients. Not because she was famous, but because they knew her story. They had seen her heart. The photo of her with the 10 Navy SEALs now hung in her living room, framed beside Aiden's graduation diploma. Every time she looked at it, she remembered that moment, the applause, the tears, the feeling of finally being seen. But more than that, she remembered the look in Aiden's eyes when he gave her his diploma. That memory lived in her forever. Still, Claire hadn't let the attention change who she was. She was still the first to show up for her shift, the last to leave, and the one who quietly stepped in when someone else was struggling. One morning, she was helping a new nurse with a patient. The hospital intercom buzzed. "Nurse Claire Evans, please report to the front lobby." She looked at her coworker. "Did I forget something?" Yeah, the nurse shrugged. "No idea." When Claire reached the lobby, she froze. There, standing in full uniform, were the same 10 SEALs who had walked into her son's graduation. It's the same strong men, serious but kind, who had made the world pause for a mother in scrubs. People around the lobby stared in silence. One of the SEALs stepped forward. It was Noah Jensen, the one whose mother Claire had saved years ago. He smiled at her. "You didn't think we'd forget about you, did you?" Claire looked confused. "What's going on?" Noah held up a small card. "You're invited. All expenses paid. Ceremony at the naval base this weekend. We're honoring people who've impacted our teams and families. You're on the list." Claire blinked, overwhelmed. "You don't have to do all this." Noah shook his head. "It's not about what we have to do. It's about what's right." Word spread through the hospital quickly. Claire was going to be honored by the U.S. Navy. Her co-workers clapped and hugged her. Some cried. Claire was still stunned. She had never been on a military base. She'd never even been to a real ceremony. That weekend, she and Aiden drove out to the base. It was a quiet road lined with tall trees. She saw through the gates. She saw flags waving, rows of clean white buildings, and a large gathering. Space decorated with lights and chairs. Everything was set for something special. Claire wore a simple blue dress. Aiden wore the same borrowed suit from the mayor's dinner. They didn't need anything expensive. Their presence alone meant more than anything money could buy. As they entered the ceremony area, hundreds of people turned to look. Soldiers, officers, their families, everyone was waiting. A stage had been built at the front, and behind it was a large banner that read, "Honoring Quiet Heroes." Claire was led to the front row. Aiden sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. Her heart was pounding. One by one, speakers came up. They talked about bravery, service, and sacrifice. Then Noah walked to the microphone. "Today," he said, "we honor people who never wore a uniform but served this country all the same. People who gave everything and asked for nothing. One of those people is here today." He paused, scanning the crowd, and then looked directly at Claire. "She's not a soldier. She doesn't carry a weapon. But she saves lives every single day. She saved my mother and many others. And when her son's big moment was nearly taken from her, she didn't complain. She stood with quiet strength, the same way she's always stood for others." Claire's eyes were full of tears. She looked down, embarrassed but deeply moved. Noah continued. The world saw a clip of that day. What they didn't see is everything that came before it. The nights she stayed up, the meals she skipped, the shoes she wore until they fell apart. She gave her son everything she had, and in return he gave her the recognition she never asked for. The crowd stood and applauded as Noah stepped forward and held up a silver plaque. It read, "To Claire Evans, for service beyond the call, for love without limits, for courage that quietly shaped a generation." The applause didn't stop. Claire walked to the stage slowly, hands shaking. She accepted the plaque with a trembling smile and hugged Noah tightly. Then she turned to the microphone, unsure what to say. "I never thought I'd be standing here," she began softly. "I'm just a nurse, a mom. I don't have medals or training. Do I know what it feels like to fight every single day for something you love? She paused. The silence in the crowd was deep, respectful. I didn't do anything alone. My son stood by me. The SEALs believed in me. The nurses I work with, every single one of them makes a difference. And now, I just want every person wearing scrubs or standing quietly in the background to know. We matter too. The applause came again. It wasn't wild. It was strong, solid, like the beating of 1,000 grateful hearts. After the ceremony, many came up to her military wives, medics, commanders. One woman said, "You reminded us that strength doesn't always come with rank. Sometimes it comes with kindness." Later that night, Claire and Aiden walked along the quiet base together. The stars were bright. There was a calm in the air that wrapped around them like a soft blanket. "Mom," Aiden said, "you changed their lives. Not just with the past, but today." Claire smiled. "I just spoke the truth." Aiden looked at her. That's why it mattered. The next few weeks brought more surprises. A local newspaper ran her story again, and a national magazine published an article titled "The Nurse Who Stood Taller Than a Nation." But Claire didn't care much for fame. She still showed up for work, still treated her patients with the same gentle hands and quiet strength. One morning, a young girl came to the hospital with her father. She looked nervous and held a little notebook. Claire smiled at her and said gently, "It's okay, sweetheart. I'll take care of you." The girl smiled shyly and whispered, "Are you the nurse from the video? The one with the SEALs?" Claire nodded. "That's me." The girl looked amazed. "You're my hero." Claire knelt down and touched the girl's hand. "You know what? You're mine, because you're brave, just for being here today." It wasn't just children who saw Claire differently. Young nurses came to her for advice. Older nurses told her she inspired them. Patients thanked her more. Even the janitor at the hospital, who barely spoke, started leaving her small notes that said things like, "Keep being you." Claire often wondered why all of this had happened. Why, after all those quiet years, the world suddenly noticed her. But in her heart, she knew the answer. It was because of one simple moment when her son stood up, refused to let the world ignore her, and the SEALs walked in to prove she mattered. That moment sparked something in others. It reminded people that dignity doesn't come from money or fashion or titles. It comes from how you love, how you give, and how you stand, even when no one claps. In time, Claire would go on to speak at more events. Not for fame, but to give hope to others like her people who had been overlooked, forgotten, pushed aside. She always ended her talks with the same words. You don't have to be loud to be strong. You just have to keep showing up. That's what real heroes do. Every time she said it, people stood. Not because she asked them to, but because they felt it deeply. Because of a mother in scrubs. Because of a son who refused to stay silent. Because of 10 SEALs who knew real bravery when they saw it. And because sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest truth. Claire's story had already touched millions, but she didn't live like someone who had become famous. She still washed her scrubs by hand when the washing machine broke. She still packed leftover soup for lunch. She still walked to the bus stop every morning, nodding at the neighbors who waved at her with a little more respect now. But something inside Claire had changed. Not in a loud, proud way, but deep down in her soul. For the first time in years, she no longer felt invisible. She felt seen, not just for what she did, but for who she was. That feeling gave her a quiet kind of peace she had never known. Aiden was now in his first year at university. The scholarship he had received after the graduation moment had taken the heavy weight off Claire's shoulders. Every day, she missed seeing him at home, missed the small talks at the kitchen table, missed watching him do homework late at night, but she also felt proud, knowing that her sacrifices had turned into something powerful, his future. They spoke on the phone often. Aiden told her about his classes, his new friends, and the professors who were inspired by his graduation speech. He had joined a student group that worked with young kids from low-income neighborhoods, helping them with reading, homework, and confidence. One night he called her with excitement in his voice. "Mom, he said. Guess what? What? She asked, smiling as she folded laundry. They want me to speak at the university's charity gala. I'm going to talk about you. Claire laughed softly. Me. Because people need to know that real heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear scrubs and carry wildflowers. Claire felt her eyes fill with tears. I'm just your mother, Aiden. You're not just anything, Mom, he said. It's your everything. A few weeks later, Claire was sitting in the audience of a large hall filled with students, professors, and donors. The lights were dimmed, and music played softly in the background. Then Aiden stepped onto the stage, dressed in a simple suit and holding a piece of paper. But when he reached the microphone, he folded the paper and put it in his pocket. I was going to read a speech, he began, but I realized I don't need notes to talk about the person who changed my life. He paused and looked toward his mother in the front row. My mom is here tonight. Most of you probably know her as the nurse who was escorted by Navy SEALs at a high school graduation. But I want to tell you about the woman behind that moment. He spoke about her working double shifts, skipping meals, staying up all night with him when he had a fever, and showing up to every school event even when she had no energy left. He talked about how she never asked for praise, never asked for help, and never let the weight of the world break her spirit. She's the strongest person I know, Aiden said. And if I can be half the human she is, I'll be proud. The room was completely silent. Then the applause started, and it didn't stop. Claire stood up slowly, not because she wanted attention, but because she had to. The love in that room surrounded her like a warm blanket. After the event, dozens of people came up to her. A woman in a wheelchair said, "You remind me of my mother. Thank you for reminding the world that being kind is the bravest thing of all." A student who had grown up in foster care said, "I didn't think I'd make it, but after hearing your story, I believe I can." Claire didn't know how to respond to so much kindness. She just hugged them, smiled, and said, "You matter too. Don't forget that." When she got home that night, she sat by the window and looked at the stars. She thought of Michael, her late husband, and whispered, "He's going to be just fine." I kept my promise. A soft breeze blew through the window, and she closed her eyes, feeling like maybe Michael had heard her. As the months passed, Claire received letters from people across the country. Some were from young girls studying to become nurses. Others were from single mothers struggling to raise their children. One letter said, "You made me believe I'm not alone. Thank you for showing us that love doesn't need to be loud to be strong." Claire carefully kept every letter in a shoebox under her bed. She read them when she felt tired, or when a patient was rude, or when the day just felt too long. Each letter reminded her that the small things she did, the little acts of love, were not wasted. One day the hospital director called Claire into his office. She thought maybe there was a schedule change or a mistake in paperwork. But when she walked in, she saw a group of nurses standing there with smiles on their faces. "What's going on?" she asked, confused. The director smiled. "Claire, we're starting a new mentorship program for young nurses. We want you to lead it." Claire blinked. "Me, yes, you," he said. "Who better to guide new nurses than someone who's lived the truth of this work? Someone who's loved it, suffered through it, and still shows up with heart?" The other nurses nodded. One of them added, "You've already been doing it unofficially. Just want to make it official." Claire felt her heart swell. She didn't need a title, but this meant something more. It was trust. It was acknowledgement. It was her chance to give what she had learned to others. The mentorship program began the following week. Claire met with 5 young nurses fresh out of school. They were nervous, full of energy, and a little unsure of themselves. She listened to them, shared her own stories, gave tips on how to stay strong during difficult shifts, reminded them to always see the patient as a person, not just a file, week after week. The young nurses returned, more confident and grateful. One of them, named Emily, said, "You make this feel possible. When I feel like quitting, I hear your voice in my head." Claire smiled. "If I can do it, so can you. Just don't forget why you started." The program became a success. Other hospitals heard about it and started similar projects. People began calling it the Claire Method, simple care, deep empathy, and quiet strength. Meanwhile, Aiden came home one weekend with exciting news. "Mom," he said. "Guess what?" Claire laughed. "Another award?" "No," he grinned. "Better. I've been accepted into the medical program. I'm going to be a doctor." Clara froze, her Lalaris eyes wide. "A doctor?" He nodded. "Thanks to you." She hugged him tightly. "You did this, Aiden, not me." He shook his head. "No, you taught me everything I needed. Courage, discipline, compassion. I just followed your example." Claire didn't know how to respond. She just held him and let her tears fall. A few months later, Aiden gave her another surprise. He had written an essay for a national competition titled "The Strongest Person I Know." It was about her. The essay was published in newspapers, and soon after, a small publishing company offered Claire a chance to write a book. At first she said no. "I'm not a writer," she told them, but Aiden convinced her. "Just write the way you talk to me from the heart." So she did. The book was titled Scrubs and Wildflowers. It told her story growing up poor, becoming a nurse, losing Michael, raising Aiden, the graduation day, the seals, and everything that followed. It wasn't fancy writing. It was simple, honest, and filled with emotion. The book became a surprise. Bestseller. People all over the country wrote to her again. Nurses, single parents, teachers, and even retired soldiers. One note simply said, "Thank you for making us feel seen." Claire remained humble through it all. She still walked the same halls at the hospital, still sat by patients during hard times, and still brought soup for her coworkers during long shifts. One day, a nurse in training asked her, "Claire, what do you think is the most important thing you've learned in your journey?" Claire smiled softly. "That silence doesn't mean weakness. That being gentle doesn't make you small. And that the most powerful thing you can do for someone is just to show up, again and again, with love." That was the truth she had lived. She didn't wear a crown or command attention, but through her love, patience, and sacrifice, she had changed the world one person at a time. In the end, Claire Evans, the nurse in Old Scrubs with a bouquet of wildflowers, had become a symbol of quiet strength. Not because she wanted to, but because she had earned it. And though the world may move on, those who heard her story would always remember one simple truth. Sometimes, the loudest heroes are the ones who never raise their voice. They just hold your hand when it matters most.